I stared at my phone screen in complete disbelief. There it was, my private lake, my sanctuary, listed on a vacation rental website for $200 a night. The photos showed my dock, my fishing spot, my morning coffee view, but the listing claimed it was lakeside paradise retreat perfect for family getaways. Someone had turned my personal paradise into a business, without my permission, without my knowledge. My hands shook as I scrolled through the fake reviews and booking calendar. Months of reservations. Strangers had been coming to my property, using my lake, treating my home like a hotel. The worst part was the host profile. A smiling woman named Karen, with 5-star ratings and glowing testimonials about her beautiful lakefront property management. That was when I realized the HOA president who had been harassing me about my lake access had crossed a line I never imagined possible. She was making money off my land. 5 years ago, I bought 23 acres of heaven, rolling hills, dense woods, a crystal-clear lake that reflected the sunrise every morning like a perfect mirror. After 15 years of city life, traffic jams, and concrete everywhere, this ranch property felt like coming home to a place I had never been. The previous owner was an elderly farmer who had loved this land for 40 years. He walked me around the property boundaries with tears in his eyes, pointing out the best fishing spots and the meadow where deer came to drink at sunset. I paid every penny I had saved, took out a mortgage that made my accountant nervous. But when I stood on that dock for the first time, watching mist rise from the water while coffee steamed in my hands, I knew I had made the right choice. The lake sits entirely on my property. I checked the surveys 3 times, hired 2 different companies to confirm the boundaries. Every square foot of water belonged to me. This was not a shared resource or community amenity. This was my private sanctuary. My morning routine became sacred. Wake up at sunrise, walk down to the dock with coffee and my fishing rod, cast a line while watching the world wake up around me. Herons would stand motionless in the shallows. Turtles would surface near the lily pads. Sometimes a family of deer would appear at the water's edge, and we would watch each other in comfortable silence. I built a small deck overlooking the water, planted native flowers along the shoreline, installed a fire pit where I would sit on clear nights, watching stars reflect in the lake like scattered diamonds. The rural community felt perfect too. Neighbors who waved when they drove past. People who understood that privacy mattered and boundaries were respected. For 3 blissful years, life was exactly what I had dreamed it would be. Then the county decided our area needed an HOA. I attended the first meeting reluctantly. The organizer was a local businessman who promised the HOA would focus on basic issues: road maintenance, snow removal, maybe coordinating bulk trash pickup. Nothing invasive, nothing that would interfere with property rights or personal choices. Most of my neighbors seemed reasonable, farmers and retirees who valued independence and quiet living. We elected officers, signed basic bylaws, and agreed on minimal annual dues. I felt cautiously optimistic about community cooperation without community interference. For 6 months, everything worked smoothly. The HOA organized a road repair project that improved everyone's access. We coordinated with the county on better emergency services coverage. It felt like neighbors helping neighbors, exactly as promised. Then Karen moved in. She bought the house directly across the county road from my property entrance, close enough that I could see her driveway from my front porch, close enough that she could see my lake access road from her kitchen window. The moving trucks arrived on a Tuesday. Expensive vehicles, professional movers, furniture that looked like it came from magazine photo shoots. Karen supervised everything while wearing designer clothes and carrying a clipboard, checking items off lists and directing workers with military precision. She introduced herself the next morning while I was loading fishing gear into my truck. Professional smile, firm handshake, immediate questions about property lines, community resources, and HOA policies. I thought she seemed organized and civic-minded, maybe a little intense, but some people are naturally detail-oriented. I had no idea I was meeting my future tormentor. Karen's first HOA meeting happened 3 weeks after she moved in. She arrived early, carrying a thick binder and a presentation folder. She had researched every property in our district, memorized our bylaws, and prepared what she called improvement recommendations. The previous HOA president was a quiet retired teacher who ran meetings from handwritten notes. Karen's presentation included printed charts, property value comparisons, and a PowerPoint about maximizing community standards. Within 10 minutes, she had been nominated for vice president. Within 20 minutes, she was running the meeting. The retiring president looked relieved to hand over his responsibilities to someone so obviously prepared and motivated. Karen's first initiative focused on visual harmony and property aesthetics. She distributed printed packets showing examples of appropriate landscaping, mailbox designs, and driveway materials. Everything looked expensive and uniform. Then she mentioned my lake. I've noticed one property has unrestricted water access that creates visibility issues from the main road. We should consider establishing guidelines for waterfront property management to maintain neighborhood appeal. My stomach dropped. She was talking about my lake, my private lake that sat entirely on my land, invisible from any public road unless someone specifically drove up my driveway to look for it. I raised my hand. "Excuse me, but which property are you referring to?" Karen smiled that professional smile. "The lakefront property directly across from my home. I think we could work together to develop access protocols that benefit everyone while preserving the natural beauty that makes our community special." Access protocols for my private lake on my private property. I kept my voice calm. That lake is entirely on private property with no public access or visibility concerns. I'm not sure what protocols would be necessary. Karen's smile never wavered. "I've done some research into historical property records. There are interesting easement considerations that might affect current usage rights. I think we should discuss this privately after the meeting." Historical easement considerations. I had checked my property surveys obsessively before buying. There were no easements, no shared access rights, no community claims on my land. But other neighbors were nodding along with Karen's presentation. She had done her homework, seemed knowledgeable, and spoke with the confidence of someone who understood legal and regulatory issues better than the rest of us. After the meeting, Karen approached me with that same professional demeanor. "I hope you understand I'm only trying to help our community maintain property values and harmonious relationships. I've found some concerning information about your lake access that we should address before it becomes a larger issue." She handed me a manila folder containing photocopied documents, old surveys from the 1960s, county records from before my property was subdivided, pages of legal text highlighted in yellow marker. "There appears to be a historical community easement that was never formally resolved when your property was sold. I'm sure we can work out an arrangement that protects everyone's interests." I took the folder home and spent the next 3 hours researching every document. The papers were real, but they referenced land parcels that had been redrawn decades ago. The easement mentioned in the old surveys applied to a different section of the original farm property, nowhere near my current lake. Karen had either misunderstood the documents or was deliberately misrepresenting their relevance to my property. I called her the next morning to explain the discrepancy. I appreciate your concern, but these documents don't apply to my lake. The easement referenced here was resolved when the original farm was subdivided in 1987. My title insurance and current surveys confirm no existing easements or community rights. Karen's voice remained perfectly polite. I think you might be misinterpreting some technical language. I've consulted with a real estate attorney who confirmed these documents raise legitimate questions about current usage rights. We should probably have a professional survey done to clarify the situation. A professional survey of my property at my expense to resolve questions about rights that did not exist. Karen, I've already had multiple professional surveys done. My property boundaries and ownership rights are clearly established. There are no community easements or shared access rights to my lake. The politeness in her voice developed a sharp edge. I understand you're attached to your current arrangement, but community standards and legal compliance are everyone's responsibility. I'm trying to help you avoid future complications by addressing this proactively. That was when I realized Karen was not confused about property rights. She was not trying to help me avoid complications. She was creating the complications. 3 months after Karen's first easement concerns, my phone rang on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee on my dock. Hey, this might sound weird, but I think I found your lake on a vacation rental website. My friend Mike was scrolling through rental properties for his family vacation. He recognized my dock in one of the photos and called to ask if I had started a side business. What are you talking about? I would never rent out my property. Mike texted me the website link. I clicked it while walking back toward my house, expecting to find some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. My blood turned to ice water. There was my lake, my dock, my fire pit, my carefully planted flower beds, professional photos taken from every angle showcasing the sunrise view, the fishing spots, the peaceful meadow where deer came to drink. The listing title read, Lakeside Paradise Retreat Perfect for Family Getaways. The description promised exclusive access to pristine private lake with fishing, swimming, and nature activities. Peaceful rural setting ideal for romantic escapes or family adventures. The rental price was $200 per night, minimum 3-night stay, additional fees for fishing equipment and fire pit usage. The host profile showed Karen's smiling face with the name Karen M. Lakefront Property Specialist. 5-star reviews, over 50 completed bookings, glowing testimonials about her beautiful property management and attention to guest satisfaction. I scrolled through months of booking calendar dates, weekend reservations, week-long family vacations, romantic getaways, all scheduled for my private property without my knowledge or permission. My hands shook as I read the fake reviews. Karen's lakefront retreat exceeded all expectations. The sunrise fishing was incredible, and the kids loved swimming in the crystal-clear water. We felt like we had our own private paradise. Perfect romantic getaway. Karen provided everything we needed for a magical weekend by the lake. The fire pit under the stars was unforgettable. Amazing family vacation spot. Karen's property management was flawless, and the lake activities kept everyone entertained. We're definitely booking again next year. Strangers had been coming to my property, using my lake, swimming in my water, fishing from my dock, having romantic dinners around my fire pit. And Karen had been collecting $200 per night for the privilege. I called the rental website immediately. The customer service representative confirmed the listing had been active for 8 months. Karen had provided documentation claiming property management authority and rental licensing credentials. Can you tell me how many bookings have been completed? I show 63 completed reservations with a total booking value of $38,400. $38,000. Karen had made $38,000 renting out my private property, while I had no idea strangers were accessing my land. I hung up and immediately drove around my property perimeter, looking for evidence of unauthorized access. Behind my house, I found a worn path through the woods that I had assumed was created by deer traffic. Following the path led to tire tracks in a hidden clearing, trash scattered near the lake shore, cigarette butts around my fire pit, empty beer cans floating in the shallows near my dock. Someone had been accessing my property from the back boundary, avoiding my main driveway and front entrance completely. Karen had been giving guests detailed directions to sneak onto my land without my knowledge. I found more evidence near the lake. Sunscreen bottles wedged between dock planks, a child's forgotten swimming toy tangled in the lily pads, fresh fishing lines snagged on submerged branches where someone had been casting from my dock. The violation felt physical, like discovering strangers had been living in my bedroom while I was away. My sanctuary had been turned into a commodity. My private paradise had become Karen's profit center. I called Karen immediately. "We need to talk now." Her voice maintained that infuriating professional politeness. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "You listed my property on a vacation rental website. You've been charging people to use my private lake. This needs to stop immediately." A pause, then a slight shift in tone, like she was switching to a different script. "I think there might be some confusion about property usage rights. As we discussed during our HOA meetings, there are legitimate community easement concerns that affect lakefront access protocols." "There are no easement concerns. This is fraud. You're making money by renting access to property you do not own." Karen's voice became colder. "I've been very careful to operate within established legal frameworks. The rental management company has verified all necessary documentation and licensing requirements. If you have concerns about community property usage, we should discuss them through proper HOA channels." Community property usage. She was claiming my private lake was community property. "Karen, you know exactly what you're doing. Take down that listing immediately or I'm calling the police and my attorney." I think you should be very careful about making threats or taking actions that could interfere with legitimate business operations. There could be serious legal consequences for attempting to restrict lawful community resource access. She hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Karen was not backing down. She was doubling down, threatening me with legal consequences for trying to protect my own property. That night, I could not sleep. Every sound outside made me wonder if more rental guests were sneaking through my woods to use my lake. My sanctuary had become a source of anxiety and violation. Karen had stolen more than rental income. She had stolen my peace. I called 3 attorneys the next morning. 2 specialized in real estate law. 1 focused on fraud and business disputes. All three gave me the same frustrating news. This is going to be expensive and time-consuming. The defendant has created a complex legal situation by filing false documentation and operating under fraudulent business credentials. We'll need to pursue multiple legal avenues simultaneously. My real estate attorney explained that Karen had somehow obtained forged property management contracts and fake easement documentation. She had submitted these materials to the vacation rental website and local business licensing authorities to legitimize her operation. She's not just trespassing on your property. She's committed multiple felonies including fraud, forgery, and theft of services. But proving that in court while stopping the ongoing rental operation will require extensive litigation. The business dispute attorney was even more direct. Plan on spending $20,000 to $30,000 and 18 months minimum. The defendant clearly has resources and legal representation. This won't be resolved quickly or cheaply. While I was meeting with lawyers, Karen was escalating her operation. She filed a counter-lawsuit claiming adverse possession rights and historical community easement enforcement. Her legal documents argued that my attempts to restrict lake access violated HOA community standards and interfered with established neighborhood resource sharing. She had hired expensive attorneys from the state capitol, lawyers who specialized in property disputes and community development law, legal firepower that would cost more than my annual salary. Karen's rental operation continued without interruption. The vacation rental website refused to remove her listing pending resolution of property management disputes. Her guests continued accessing my land through the hidden back route. The trespassing became bolder and more problematic. Weekend parties with loud music until midnight. Guests who left trash scattered around my fire pit and beer cans floating in my lake. People who set up tents on my property for unauthorized camping experiences. I installed security cameras and motion-activated lights, but Karen's guests treated these as amenities rather than deterrents. Some even posed for photos with my security equipment, apparently thinking it added to the authentic rural experience. The worst incident happened on a Friday night in July. I woke up at 2 in the morning to shouting and music from the lake area. Looking out my bedroom window, I could see a bonfire blazing near my dock and at least 12 people swimming and partying in my lake. I called the county sheriff, but the deputy who responded seemed confused about the property boundaries and rental arrangements. Karen had apparently briefed local law enforcement about community easement agreements and authorized recreational usage. Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but if there's ongoing litigation about property rights and community access, we can't just remove people who might have legitimate rental agreements. The deputy asked the party guests to keep noise levels down and left, without removing anyone from my property. I spent the rest of the night awake, listening to strangers party on my land while feeling completely powerless to stop them. The next morning, I found used condoms near my dock, broken glass in the shallows, and drug paraphernalia scattered around my fire pit. My pristine lake looked like the aftermath of a music festival. Karen's legal strategy became clear over the following weeks. She was not trying to win a quick court victory. She was trying to make the legal battle so expensive and time-consuming that I would eventually surrender or accept some kind of settlement that allowed her continued access to my property. Her attorneys filed motion after motion, requesting extensions, demanding additional documentation, and challenging every aspect of my property ownership. Each legal filing cost me hundreds of dollars in attorney fees to respond. Meanwhile, her rental income continued generating thousands of dollars per month. She could afford to drag out the legal proceedings indefinitely, while I hemorrhaged money trying to defend my basic property rights. Some of my neighbors began taking Karen's side. She had started offering them community benefits from her rental operation, discounted services from her cleaning crews, free maintenance work on their driveways, cash payments for allowing rental guests to park on their properties. The HOA meetings became hostile territory. Karen would present her case as protecting community resource access against my selfish monopolization of neighborhood amenities. Other residents would nod along, especially after receiving Karen's financial incentives. I found myself increasingly isolated, fighting a legal battle I could not afford against an opponent who was profiting from the crime she was committing against me. Traditional justice was failing. The system seemed designed to protect the person with more money and fewer scruples. That was when I realized I needed to change my strategy completely. I stopped trying to fight Karen through official channels and started studying her the way she had studied me. Late nights on my computer became research missions, public records searches, property ownership databases, court documents from other legal cases, business registration filings, social media profiles, any information that might reveal vulnerability or opportunity. Karen owned her house through a limited liability company based in another state. The property had been purchased with cash, suggesting significant financial resources. But the LLC structure also meant complex ownership arrangements that might create complications. I discovered Karen had been involved in similar property disputes in 2 other states, legal cases where she had claimed easement rights or community access privileges for properties near her residences. The pattern suggested this was not her first attempt at unauthorized property exploitation. More importantly, I found the weakness in her current situation. Karen's house sat on a 5-acre lot that fronted the county road, but her actual residence was set back nearly 300 yards from the road. The house was connected to county road access by a long gravel driveway that crossed through an undeveloped wooded area. The county property records showed something interesting about that wooded access area. It was not part of Karen's property. It was a separate 1-acre lot that had been carved out during the original subdivision to preserve road access rights for all the properties in our district. Karen did not own her driveway. She had an easement to use it, but the actual land belonged to a different property parcel. That separate lot was currently owned by the county for back taxes. The previous owner had died 7 years ago, and the estate had never resolved the tax obligations. The property was scheduled for public auction to recover the outstanding tax debt. I researched the auction process obsessively. Tax sales require public notice 30 days in advance. Bidding is open to anyone who can prove financial capability. The minimum bid is set to cover outstanding taxes plus administrative costs. For Karen's access lot, the minimum bid would be $1,200. $1,200 to buy the land that controlled Karen's only access to her house. I spent 2 weeks verifying the legal implications with my real estate attorney. If I purchased the access lot, I would own the land that Karen's driveway crossed. I could legally restrict or control her access to her own property. This is technically legal, my attorney confirmed. But it's also aggressive property warfare. Make sure you understand the potential consequences before pursuing this strategy. I understood the consequences perfectly. Karen had turned my sanctuary into her profit center. She had stolen my peace, violated my privacy, and was making thousands of dollars from her crime while I spent my savings fighting her in court. It was time to apply her own tactics against her. I researched other potential bidders for the access lot. The county clerk confirmed only 2 people had requested information about the upcoming tax sale. One was a local real estate investor who bought distressed properties for development. The other was me. I prepared for the auction like preparing for war. Secured financing well above the minimum bid in case competition drove up the price. Consulted with a surveyor to confirm exact property boundaries and access rights. Retained a different attorney who specialized in property access disputes. Most importantly, I kept the entire plan completely secret. Karen continued operating her illegal rental business, while I quietly prepared to cut off her escape route. The psychological shift felt profound. For months, I had been playing defense, trying to protect what was mine while Karen attacked from every angle. Now I was moving to offense, using her own aggressive tactics to create consequences she had never anticipated. I studied her daily routines from my front porch. Karen left her house every morning at 7:30 for her commute to work in town. She returned every evening between 6 and 7 o'clock. Her only access route took her down that long gravel driveway across the lot I was planning to purchase. Karen had trapped herself without realizing it. She had bought an expensive house in a rural area for privacy and access to my lake, but her isolation would become her vulnerability once I controlled her driveway. The auction was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the county courthouse. I took the day off work and dressed like I was attending a business meeting. Professional clothes, confident demeanor, briefcase with all necessary documentation. Karen had no idea her world was about to change completely. The night before the auction, I sat on my dock watching the sunset reflect in my lake. For the first time in months, I felt hope instead of helplessness. Tomorrow the tables would turn. The county courthouse auction room felt like a theater before the curtain rises. About 20 people scattered across folding chairs, most of them looking bored or disinterested. Professional real estate investors with thick folders and calculators. A few curious locals who attended auctions for entertainment. I recognized the other serious bidder immediately. A man in his 50s wearing expensive boots and carrying a leather portfolio. He had the confident posture of someone who bought distressed properties regularly and knew exactly how these proceedings worked. The auctioneer began with routine announcements about bidding procedures and payment requirements. Winners must provide certified funds within 48 hours. All sales are final. Properties are sold as is without warranty or guarantee. Karen's access lot was the 7th property on the auction list. When the auctioneer announced the address and legal description, my heart rate spiked like I was about to jump out of an airplane. 1-acre wooded lot providing road access easement for residential properties in Meadowbrook District. Minimum bid $1,200 to cover outstanding taxes and administrative costs. The professional investor opened the bidding at the minimum. I immediately countered with $1,500. He raised to $1,800. I went to $2,500. The auctioneer looked around the room for additional bidders. No one else showed interest. The professional investor studied his notes for a moment, apparently calculating whether the lot had enough development potential to justify higher investment. He shook his head and sat back in his chair. Going once at $2,500, going twice. Sold to bidder number 7 for $2,500. I had won. The access lot was mine. The paperwork process took 2 hours. certified funds verification, title transfer documentation, deed recording requirements, property tax assessments going forward. By noon, I legally owned the 1-acre lot that controlled Karen's only access to her house. I drove straight to the lot and walked the boundaries with my surveyor's map. Karen's gravel driveway cut directly through the center of my new property for nearly 200 yards. Without access across my land, her house would be completely landlocked. That afternoon, I visited a sign shop and ordered custom, no trespassing, warnings with my name and contact information. Large, professional signs that would make property boundaries unmistakably clear. I installed the first sign at the county road entrance to Karen's driveway on Friday morning. 2 more signs along the driveway route through my property. A final sign where her driveway crossed back onto her lot near her house. Then I installed a cable barrier across the driveway entrance with a heavy-duty padlock. Karen discovered her trapped situation when she tried to come home from work that evening. I was watering plants on my front porch when I heard her car stop at the road entrance. Car door slam, footsteps on gravel, then shouting. "What is this? You cannot block my driveway. This is illegal." I walked over to the property line where Karen was standing next to my new sign and cable barrier. Her face was flushed red with anger and disbelief. "Good evening, Karen. I see you found the new property signage." "You cannot do this. I have easement rights. You cannot prevent me from accessing my own house." I pulled out a folder containing copies of my deed and survey documentation. "Actually, I can. I purchased this access lot at yesterday's county tax auction. The driveway you've been using crosses my property. As the legal owner, I have the right to control access and restrict unauthorized use." Karen's voice shifted to the threatening tone I remembered from our phone conversations. "This is harassment and illegal interference with property rights. I am calling my attorneys immediately. You will face serious legal consequences for this action." I understand you might want legal advice. My attorney confirmed that property owners have full rights to control access across their land. If you need to reach your house, we could discuss access arrangements. The word arrangements made Karen's eyes narrow with recognition. She understood immediately that I was using her own tactics against her. "What kind of arrangements?" I smiled the same professional smile Karen had used during our first HOA meeting. "Well, since you've been operating a successful vacation rental business using my property, you clearly understand that access to desirable locations has commercial value. I think we could work out a fair access licensing agreement." "How much?" I was thinking $200 per day. The same rate you've been charging guests to use my lake. Seems like a reasonable market price for rural property access rights. Karen stared at me in complete silence for nearly a minute. I could see her calculating the implications. $200 per day just to drive to and from her own house. $73,000 per year for driveway access. More expensive than most people's mortgages. This is extortion. No, this is property rights. The same property rights you've been violating for months while making thousands of dollars from my lake. I'm simply applying the same business model to your access needs." Karen's phone started ringing, probably rental guests trying to confirm weekend reservations. "I cannot run my business if I cannot access my property reliably." I completely understand. Business operations require consistent access to necessary resources. Perhaps we could discuss a long-term licensing agreement that provides the stability your business needs. I handed her a business card with my contact information. Think it over. I'm sure we can find an arrangement that works for everyone. Until then, you're welcome to park at the county road and walk to your house. It's only about 300 yards through the woods. Karen looked at the business card, then at the cable barrier, then at her car parked on the county road. You think you're so clever. This is not over. I hope not. I look forward to continuing our business relationship. Karen walked back to her car and sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, apparently making phone calls, probably to her attorneys, possibly to her rental guests to cancel weekend bookings. Eventually, she drove away, leaving her house inaccessible and her rental business effectively shut down. I went inside and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in months, my lake felt peaceful again. Karen lasted 4 days. 4 days of walking 300 yards through the woods twice a day to reach her car. 4 days of canceling rental bookings and refunding guest payments. 4 days of her expensive attorneys explaining that I had every legal right to control access across my property. On Tuesday morning, Karen called me. We need to discuss terms. Her voice had lost all traces of professional politeness or threatening bluster. She sounded exhausted and defeated. I'm listening. I want to end this situation. What will it take to restore my driveway access? I had prepared for this conversation carefully. First, remove your vacation rental listing immediately and permanently. Second, reimburse me for all legal expenses from your fraudulent operation. Third, pay compensation for 8 months of unauthorized property use. Fourth, sign a legally binding agreement never to claim any rights or access to my lake property. Silence on the other end of the call. How much compensation are we talking about? $38,400. The exact amount you collected from renting my property without permission. Another long silence. And if I agree to these terms, you'll restore my driveway access. I'll grant you a permanent access easement across my property for residential purposes only. No commercial use, no rental guest traffic, just normal access to your house. Karen made one final attempt at negotiation. I cannot afford $38,000 immediately. Can we arrange a payment plan? Certified cashier's check within 48 hours, or the access restrictions remain in place indefinitely. She hung up without responding. Wednesday morning, a courier delivered an envelope containing a certified check for $38,400 and signed agreements removing all rental listings and disclaiming any rights to my property. I removed the cable barrier that afternoon. The resolution felt more satisfying than I had expected, not because I had defeated Karen, but because the system had finally worked correctly. Actions had consequences. Crimes had penalties. Justice had been served through legal means rather than corruption or manipulation. Karen's HOA presidency ended quietly. Other neighbors began asking uncomfortable questions about her rental operation and the community benefits she had been distributing. The fake easement documentation fell apart under legal scrutiny. Her credibility in the community evaporated completely. Within 6 months, Karen sold her house and moved away. I heard she relocated to another state, presumably to find new properties to exploit or new communities to manipulate. I used the compensation money to install professional security systems around my property perimeter, motion-activated cameras, alarm sensors on all access points, legal signage clearly establishing property boundaries and trespassing penalties. More importantly, I hired an attorney to draft ironclad property protections that would prevent future Karen situations. Detailed surveys, title insurance updates, legal documentation that would make any future easement claims impossible to pursue. My lake is peaceful again. Morning coffee on the dock, evening fishing while watching deer come to drink, stars reflected in still water on clear nights. But the peace feels different now, earned rather than assumed, protected rather than vulnerable. I learned that sometimes fighting bullies requires using their own tactics against them. But the difference between justice and revenge is using those tactics within legal boundaries to restore balance rather than create new victims. Karen taught me that property rights are only as strong as your willingness to defend them. She also taught me that entitled people who exploit others eventually make enemies of the wrong person. Someone who has more patience, better planning, and absolutely nothing left to lose.